So what is the latest here? This is like the latest twist in the kind of ongoing controversy and questions around this new plane.
Exactly. That plane maxing is set to begin soon as the White House is making a plan to quickly upgrade that Qatari gifted Air Force One that President Trump unveiled just a few weeks ago. And this comes with some remarkable reporting from our colleague Kristen Holmes. She says that according to two sources familiar with the matter, there were internal discussions among Trump administration's officials about whether President Trump should avoid flying that new plane in high threat areas. Now, the extent of these forthcoming upgrades are unclear, but it comes after the president returned from Turkey on the old plane after flying there on the new plane. He said that was because the new plane was going to be sent to Mildenhall Air Force Base in the United Kingdom for service members to give it a tour. But we reported at the time, just a couple of weeks ago, that that decision was driven, at least in part, by escalating security concerns as this conflict with Iran had been ramping up in those days. Now, before that trip, officials had discussed the possibility of Trump not traveling on that plane to high-risk areas, but the decision was ultimately made for the president to proceed on this brand new plane. It was cleared for use, the president traveling to Ankara for the G7 summit. Now, officials, one of those sources told Kristen, later realized that clearing it for use on that trip was a mistake, and now they are going to take some steps to rectify that. We heard from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt in a statement. She says, quote, "The new Air Force One is perfectly safe for the president's travels, but will receive additional upgrades and enhancements in the fall, which will take approximately 1 month to complete." Now, the president is still expected to use this plane for some domestic trips, as well as the possibility of international trips in the coming months before those upgrades. But some experts have warned that that 1 month timeline isn't enough for the extent of the security upgrades that they say are needed.
Just to start with the speed with which this jet was rolled out, this new Air Force One was rolled out, what did you make of it?
Well, we can look at how long it's taken to build the new 747s for the president. I think it's been 6 or 7 years. So, it takes a good deal of time to prepare those aircraft for presidential travel. We think of 747s as, transport airplanes or commercial airliners. These are actually Air Force aircraft, and they're prepared for a whole lot more than what the typical 747 flying customers around is.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said in a statement, quote, "The new Air Force One is perfectly safe for the president's travels. We'll receive additional upgrades and enhancements in the fall, which will take approximately 1 month to complete. During that time, the president will fly on the old Air Force One." What is your sense of what enhancements would be needed at this point?
Well, first of all, they're classified. So not besides, I don't know details about them. They don't like to talk about them. The Air Force won't specifically talk about them, but they've got all kinds of capabilities to be able to recognize and mitigate any threats that may occur to the aircraft in the air, in addition to the aerial refueling. So there's a lot of things that this U.S. Air Force plane can do with a full Air Force crew to prepare and defend itself and fly safely with the President of the United States, a critical mission that they have every day.
And they're extraordinarily good at what they do, having been on Air Force One a number of times. One of the questions that I've had is, you make the really great point about how long the process was taking compared to this one. Is a month, as the White House Press Secretary says, all it's really going to take to update the plane to where it needs to be?
Well, there's radars, there's different electronic warfare devices, there's elements that this airplane will have to protect the cargo, which is the President of the United States. Whether they can do that in a month or not, we saw them try and do it as quick as they could. Flying domestically is probably a whole lot safer, but flying out of Turkey, where they were literally on the border with Iran while we're in conflict with Iran, and so they were within arm's reach of the enemy at this point, I can see that there was certainly concerns in that area. But once they got back to friendlier skies, they obviously made a decision that the president could fly on the aircraft at that point. But in order to have that airplane ready to go 24/7 anywhere in the world, they want to make sure it has absolutely every defensive capability that it needs to have to protect the president. And that's what they're going to do. And if they can do that in a month, that's great. And then you got to figure a couple of years from now, when the president's out of office, they'll have to what's called demill the airplane, which is take a lot of these capabilities off, because when he uses that aircraft as part of his presidential library, he won't have the need or the ability to fly with those defensive measures.
The president, you made a really good point earlier about there's a lot of stuff they don't talk about with these planes. You kind of know riding on them that they have capabilities, but you don't know exactly what it is. The president was asked specifically about anti-missile defense systems, which the Qatari plane reportedly was not yet equipped with. He actually answered the question at some level. Does the standard Air Force One have on it things that make it something similar to that? Is that what makes it so secure?
Well, listen, again, I'm not an Air Force One pilot and don't have access to the capabilities I have. I just know that they will spare no expense to assure that that plane, every time the president is on it, is as safe as possible, with every anti-missile capability they have, every radar that's necessary, every electronic intelligence gathering tool that they have to have, as well as a full crew of Air Force operators that are on board to operate that military equipment, which is not equipment you see on a typical civilian 747. So getting that in place, getting that tested, getting it ready, and getting it usable is what's critical here. And whether it takes a month to finish it off or a few months, they're going to make sure that they do that, because Air Force doesn't want the president to be in harm's way. Secret Service doesn't want to be.
And that automatically raises a red flag. Any journalist worth their salt would immediately start asking a question. Wait a minute, he flew this plane, which he's been touting all this time. It cost $400 million allegedly, and maybe even more. And how much more to fix? To all the way over to Turkey, and then he won't fly that same plane back. They had to get another plane in. Any reporter would ask a question. That's a logical question to ask. And to me, this is a reflection of the incompetence of the Trump administration and the corruption of the Trump administration coming together to converge. This is the whole corrupt deal with the Qatari government to accept this royal jet in violation of all constitutional requirements, the Foreign Emoluments Clause and everything else. Not only that, but then he does the wrong job. He doesn't even get the plane fixed right. He's in such a rush because he wants to get this done so he can show off, instead of letting the Air Force take its time and do the job correctly. This is the problem with Donald Trump. He's not focused on the things the American people care about. They care about affordability, and he's spending hundreds of millions of dollars to fix up a damn luxury jet.
Steve, I do want to ask about something that Scott said. He said, look, this president has faced more than one assassination attempt, several, and you can look at the apparatus itself and say, since that is the case, shouldn't this have been taken care of beforehand, before he took any flights?
Of course, has said himself that he thinks Iran has a right to a missile program. So my question is pretty simple. Is it correct that it is no longer a war objective to destroy all of their military capacities? This is what the president has said. Have our goals been simplified to reopening the strait and to getting into a negotiation over a nuclear program? Now, I don't think you have a realistic plan to do either of those things, but I think it's important for us to know what we're funding. Are the objectives much more limited today than they were when you made that statement in March?
So I think the objectives have been consistent and clear from the beginning. And I would contrast it to North Korea, where a conventional buildup was used to hide a nuclear capability that eventually evolved to a point where it couldn't be contested. And what Iran continued to do, even after Midnight Hammer, was try to build that conventional capability to dare anyone to stop them from pursuing nuclear weapons. So getting after their conventional capabilities, missile launchers, defense industrial base, their Navy, was all part of it, ensuring they can't blackmail us into pursuing a nuclear capability. Laser focused on Iran will never have a nuclear capability. That's the promise the president has made and that he will keep in every way.
I think it's important. It is still a war objective, either through military action or through a diplomatic agreement, to destroy and disable all of Iran's meaningful military capacities, including their missile program.
As far as all, when we talked about that from the podium at the outset of this, we were talking about their defense industrial base. And if you look at the metrics of their ability to make more, that it's been overwhelmingly destroyed. Not everything, but overwhelmingly. Now, do they have missiles in underground bunkers because they're a terror state? Sure they do, and we've acknowledged that from the beginning.
Yeah,
but their capacity is less today than it's ever been
They
as a nation.
obviously have significant capacity to effectively disrupt the entirety of the Middle East and oil flows out of the Middle East, and that's not going to change. Let me ask you one more question. This is a request for supplemental funding because you don't have the funding in your base budget to do what you need to do, which makes questions about the base budget relevant. There's been a lot of attention, Mr. Secretary, on the modernization of a luxury jet that was gifted to the president by the government of Qatar. Reports suggest that maybe as much as $1 billion in your base funding, an extraordinary amount of money, has been used for an upgrade, and the plane is back in the shop for a second upgrade. As far as I can tell, never before has an administration not made public the amount of money for an upgrade or a construction contract on a presidential airplane. Obviously, we don't need or want disclose the details of that upgrade, but never before have you withheld from Congress and the public the total amount of money. I think there are two really important questions here. One, will you make public the amount of money that you are spending to upgrade this plane? And two, can you commit to this Congress and this committee that the president isn't